Thank you so much, Doctor, for the kind introduction, and I'd like to thank Dr. Sanvarwala for this kind invitation to speak on medical ethics. See, the time is 30 minutes, that's mandated by the council, but don't worry, I will try and complete it earlier. So, making it simple, what is medical ethics? It is just a process of deciding the right course of action anytime during the day when we see patients. We study the facts, we look at our skills and abilities, we have finite knowledge now with AI and in real time. So all of us are doing this every day when we look at our patients. The first thing is, what is the age of the patient? What is their economic status? So you're doing so much of filtering when you see a patient. So ethics is essentially not definable. It is not implementable also because it is not conscious and it involves not only thinking but also feeling. So medical ethics is also very closely related to law, and at times the ethics is above law. In fact, law may be, the physician may disobey laws that demand that you do unethical behavior, but you have been following your ethical practice for years, especially as family physicians, because you know the background of the family, you know the problems that the elderly are going in that family, you know what the couple is struggling to earn and provide. So there are so many things that you know about. So very important to have ethical principles. There are many professions which have got ethical codes. Among them are doctors, lawyers, engineers, chartered accountants, and also journalists. So medical ethics has a very long history from 3rd dynasty Egypt, where there is records, to the Code of Hammurabi, the oath of the Indian physician, the Vaidya's oath, then the Hippocratic oath which we were following, the oath of Asaf, and of course advice to physician, and the important Maimonides. So these are all the oaths, and we have been used to these. The Declaration of Geneva that was formed after World War II, when a lot of the war criminals were put through many inhuman experiments made to stand in the cold to observe what happens to them. So there were a lot of things. It is more of a philosophical issue because Immanuel Kant said doing what is right is not about consequences of our actions, but rather having the proper intention. And as a physician, our intention is always never to harm the patient. At first, do no harm. So there are many topics in medical ethics. I'm just giving an overview. So there is philosophy and medicine, like I said. There's informed consent, which makes an entire talk, especially for surgeons and orthopedic doctors. Truth-telling, confidentiality, justice resource allocation. How do you decide which patient goes in case of a mass requirement of hospital beds? Who gets priority? It's the doctor who decides. Transplant ethics, ethical issues in HIV and AIDS, maternal fetal conflicts, family dispute resolutions, ethical issues in surgery, human research, theories and principles. Brain death is now becoming a big issue for physicians, dying and do not resuscitate disorders. Advanced directives. We now have an advanced directive where we can ask for a living will and we sign it and give it. Yet, at the time of death, it is a group of doctors from the hospital and the relatives who will finally decide. Disclosing mistakes. Now, this is asking for trouble for all of us. Ethical issues in pediatrics, in psychiatry, ICU. Patients who refuse food and water due to their religious understanding, or when they take on a fast towards death, how do we take that? Ethics in stem cell research, geriatrics, and there are many more topics. So we are just looking at an overview. The 6 principles of medical ethics are beneficence. That is to always do good for the patient in the interest of the patient. Non-malfeasance, do no harm. Autonomy. We need to discuss any patient-related treatment, telling them all the pros and cons, and they have a right to refuse or to choose. We cannot force a patient. Justice, like I said, who gets what treatment and on the merit of illness. If there are many people who are sick with, like during COVID, you saw how patients were admitted in hospitals and people looked after them. They had to convert, dormitories into hospitals, things like that. Dignity. The patient and the doctor has a right to dignity. This is very important. So the kind of violence that you are having against doctors leaves the doctor with no dignity when he is made to bow down or to, ask forgiveness from people in power. That is demeaning and loses the dignity of a doctor. Honesty. Patients need to know the whole truth about the illness. Many a time you will be told by relatives, আপনি ওনাকে পুরো কথাটা বলবেন না, আমরা বলে দেব. But if the patient is intelligent and is conscious and alert and asks you as a physician, I would like to know what is happening to me. I think we are bound by conscience and by ethics to tell them, irrespective of what the relatives say to us. So the four pillars, of course, as a doctor for us are the trustability that the patient places in us, the competence and excellence, the appearance and demeanor, and the organization and accountability. So how do we make these ethical decisions and how should they be applied? Who needs to decide and act and who ought to? And to whom am I obligated if I'm making these decisions? So the process is in creating an awareness. What is the nature? How important? And these are things you're doing every day. This is not how we read it. When a patient walks into an emergency room, he's bleeding profusely. You look at the people who brought him in. They may be from the village. They will be poorly dressed. You know you have to do the right thing. You put him through the tests and then you say that, okay, now he needs to have some surgery done for his amputation of the limb. You and I know that if that is a farmer and he loses a limb, he will lose a livelihood. So there we need to make a decision calling in the expert, can you save this limb? So we are the ones who give these decisions. So I'm looking at one case where there was a self-medicating patient and a wrong history. This is the Dr. Nancy Verma, Kailash Verma Kumar case. Patient was a known diabetic. For 7 to 8 years, he was taken to hospital 1 in a semi-conscious condition. Blood sugar was 450. Patient was treated with insulin by the doctor and he left the hospital few hours later. Next day, brought into emergency unconscious with convulsions. Blood sugar was 32. Patient was kept for 2 hours and transferred to a bigger hospital, hospitalized for 5 days, again discharged. 5 months later, he went back to the second hospital for 2 hours and then he died on the same day. So patient's relatives alleged medical negligence that the doctor administered insulin without doing a repeat blood sugar when the first reading was 450. And 5 months later, the patient was treated casually and so it resulted in death. Now you see there are 2 occasions. They are talking about the first admission at 450 and the second one that took place in another hospital and patient died. So here good history taking is very important. Patient was already taking hypoglycemic drugs without any medical advice of a qualified doctor. This was luckily documented in the first. The doctor recorded patient is taking some drug, name not known, and proceeded to write the history. That first recording or documentation saved the doctor because the precaution is self-medication is very common in our patients. I also ask them, are you taking Ayurvedic? Are you taking Jamun? Are you taking... They take all sorts of things. Document it. Patient left the hospital on his own and this was recorded. If you don't record it and you say, no, but he went away, that is not considered proof in law. So, court observed and did not find it necessary to repeat the high blood sugar test again. So, higher the acuteness in an emergency and higher the complication, more are the chances of error. Now, this is a second case, a 25-year-old unmarried lady undergoing an exploratory laparotomy. On the table decided to have a hysterectomy because of the findings. The ethical dilemma for the doctor, surgeon and the lady's family. So we have to look at both the... So doctor's dilemma is he has not taken an informed consent to do the hysterectomy. It was only an exploratory. But it's going to be a life-saving procedure. The autonomy is, should the patient be prioritized or respect her future reproductive rights? And the family's role, how much weightage should be given because she is unmarried, she may have to marry, what will happen to her family life? So these are all the dilemmas. Now, as per the dilemma, you're taking your action. Since the lady is under anesthesia, you call the father and the mother, take their signature that this is what I'm doing. Alright, so in India, if the lady is an adult, the doctor needs her consent or a prior consent if possible, which means if there is a problem during exploration, I may have to do this. Do you agree? Yes, no. The family might be involved, but the doctor's primary concern is do no harm, save the life. And that is what will be the highest decision making in his decision. So what do we think the doctor should do? Informed consent was not taken, but we can ask the parents to give. Autonomy, it is right to save the patient's life rather than consider her reproduction. And family's role, we need to consider them and take their signature during the surgery. So, now a recent WhatsApp post has been going around and you must have seen it. In an emergency room, a patient was taken with backache. The doctor asked to do an X-ray and few tests and gave him a prescription for analgesics, asking him to go and see an orthopedic surgeon. And the prescription was over. 2 months later, a long email came to the hospital that you have done a medical negligence because the patient suffered for 2 months, and later on they went and they met a doctor and they did an MRI and it was found to be slip disc and cord compression. No precautions and no continuity of care was advised in the emergency room. So remedy is document whatever you say, and whatever documentation is done, put it down in black and white. So had they written here, painkillers given, X-ray done, advised to attend orthopedic surgeon in 15 days, that would have saved the doctor there. This is retrospectively. In an emergency room, there is so much of busyness, you can't be expected to write all these notes. But now we have to have it because we are getting penalized. So the doctor could have written, patient relatives explained to go for an orthopedic consult within 15 days and follow up with that doctor. And bed rest for 2 days or 3 days so he doesn't move around. So this is how we can take care of ourselves. There's another one that's going around, so many of you must have read it, that we are not supposed to do cross-pathy, which means we are not supposed to write allopathy, Ayurvedic medicines, Unani medicine, Chinese, Tibet, no. And they of course are not expected, though they freely write without knowing what and where. They are writing painkillers, they are writing antibiotics. This doctor wrote a Live 52 while the patient was in hospital for dengue. After a few days, patient died. When the papers were taken out, dengue treatment, there was written Live 52. Doctor was penalized for this because he was doing cross-pathy. He was an allopathic, he was not supposed to write that. So we just need to be careful of that. I'm just going to talk to you about the new Indian Penal Code was there earlier. Now we have something called Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, enacted in December 23 and effective from 2024. So it is actually good for us. It is modernizing the law. It is a replacement for the Indian Penal Code and it takes the place of Indian Penal Code 1860 as the main law. It aims to create a more citizen-centric legal framework and addresses contemporary challenges which are now coming up in medicine. And it also consolidates offences against women and children which were previously scattered in different places. So new provisions, it includes new offences like sexual intercourse on a false premise of marriage or employment and introduces stricter penalties. Structural changes are there, so are the others. So it's an updated criminal justice law. We have Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita 2023, Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita under which we will come, and Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam. So looking at these, the section 106, actually we as registered medical practitioners face up to 2 years of imprisonment and a fine, less than the general public's potential for 5 years. So doctors would get 2 years with a fine, but general public would get 5 years, aiming to balance the accountability and protect doctors from frivolous complaints. Though it still criminalizes negligence and necessitates adherence to procedures. There is a reduced but defined penalty, and the distinction is from the bad outcomes. There is stricter evidence handling, and the shift is the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita replaces the old IPC section of 304A, which looked at non-bailable offences like 106. So the new one is 106. So the 106 for medical professions directly corresponds to section 304A, which addressed cases of death due to rash or negligent, including those occurring in medical settings. What are the implications? The benefits are more because a doctor diagnoses the complications, treats them, ensures that they do not turn to harm their patients. They also offer valuable advice. So among these, the non-bailable offences are serious crimes like murder and rape, where bail is discretionary and governed by section 480. The nature of minor offences, usually punishable by up to 3 years or 4, are listed in the first schedule. Examples of bailable offences are public nuisance, assault, adulteration of drugs, petty theft, and cheating. And non-bailable are serious ones like murder, rape, kidnapping, penalties of 3+ years. Bail is not a right, it is granted only at the discretion of the court. The key roles: the magistrate can grant you a bail for offence not punishable by death or life imprisonment, and only Sessions Court can grant you bail for offences with death or life sentences of more than 7 years of imprisonment. So the key takeaway is that the non-bailable offences, the exceptions are bail may be granted to women, children, or even the sick or weak in serious cases. So we have looked at these cases. These are non-bailable: murder, rape, sedition, kidnapping for ransom, dowry deaths, robbery and dacoity. We have a number of Indian Medical Council Act, which is now giving to us the different chapters. You can read them. They are all online. General ethics and principles is in chapter 1, then your patient responsibility, public responsibility. This is the new declaration that we have to take, which is at the time of registration. I solemnly pledge myself to consecrate my life to service of humanity. Even under threat, I will not use my medical knowledge contrary to humanity, and the rest of the 11. So these are all the different chapters which you can go through, and they are very, we need to read them, we don't do it. This is just on what governance are you faced when we judge patients, or whenever justice is done to doctors. When you make a mistake, we are all judged and say, yes, this is also a method of treatment. Then you cannot be penalized for medical negligence. So this is the main thing that you have to follow. It must be acceptable to science. So when we are looking at ethical decisions, we look at a problem, we look at the age of the person, we look at the longevity of life, we look at technical factors, we look at moral parameters, legal constraints, human values, the economic status of the patient. Many of our patients will sell land and house and everything in the village to come and treat somebody who is going to be terminally ill in a few months and not have anything left. We are the ones who help them to make these decisions. Select one alternative course and tell them that this is the right one for you, so the patient does not feel guilty. These are some core communication skills, so I'm just running through these because it's very important for the doctor to communicate properly. And why is that? Because we do at least conduct during our lifespan, at least more than, depending on your number of patients, you would probably be in something like 5,000 to 10,000 interviews in a year, and that is a lot. So we need to talk to our patients properly, eliciting their problems. And the one most important thing that I would tell you is, when we talk to patients, let us always face the patient, look them into the eye and talk to them, and so they know that you are listening and paying attention, and tomorrow they are happy with your stance, and they will never come back to put you into trouble. Even if the relatives say, they'll say, no, Dr. Babu is good, he means good for me, I don't want to go. So this is how we have to carry on. Another thing is, we just a minute. So today, method of practice has become manage first, investigate, and if no diagnosis, then you look at the symptoms and the signs. This is going backwards. What we need to go back is history taking, interpretation and investigation, and finally the treatment. So, just to communicate, these were just a few more slides, but I think that I will end here. So, medical ethics is essentially a regulatory mechanism that makes it doctor publicly responsible, that though he earns his living by medicine, he will strive for the benefit of the patient and do him no harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz. Dr. Sanwarwala, organizing chairperson of the 29th FPA Con, will present a memento to Mary D. Cruz. We thank Dr. Shakir Akhtar and Dr. Shopman Mondal for chairing the post-lunch sessions. We thank them and we request them to pose for a photograph along with Dr. Cruz. I have got a few announcements to make before I leave this auditorium. I leave this dais permanently. The delegate kit and the early bird prize will be given from the cloak room 2 in the ground floor near gate number 4. But first sign the exit register for those of you who have entered this auditorium before 9 AM, please sign the exit register so that you can get the CME credit points. Well, we shall pass on to the valedictory session. The valedictory session, I hand it over to Dr. M.H. Sanwarwala, organizing chairperson, and we shall have a photo session after that. Please stay back for the photo session. Your master of ceremonies for the day, Dr. Amitabh Dantod, takes goodbye from you. If ever I have committed any mistakes or shortcomings, please pardon me. Thank you. Goodbye. Over to Dr. Sanwarwala.
Thank you. All good things have to come to an end. And this wonderful FPA Con 26, and with these words of thanks to the management of the hall, to the audiovisual team, to the caterers, Mr. Gupta ji, to all the delegates who have waited all long day listening to the enlightened speakers, and to our dear sponsors who have backed our conference today. And thank you all again, and call this conference closed today. And we could request those of you to come and pose for a photograph.
जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा काव्य उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे नव जय गाथा जय गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे. Thank you, goodbye and good night.